All right, welcome back to The Unbroken Ground, Season 4, Episode 8. The title is going to be something along the lines, I haven't fully figured it out. In case guys haven't figured this out, I don't figure that out even before I start talking about things. But staying with my Postal Service lyrics, going back to one of the, this comes from a song I've already grabbed some lyrics from, but it's going to be I am not permanent here, I am a visitor. Somewhere around like, probably I'm not permanent here is probably going to be the title of this episode. So it's been a while, been several things going on. Some crazy things, life getting in the way, doing a podcast. I've also jumped back into playing paintball, so that is also a thing. I will jump a little bit more into that. I don't know how much I'll jump into that as we go, but just some. I will jump into a little bit of what's happening in life because if you listened, you've listened to both myself and you've listened to my wife on the podcast. If you listen to every episode, so there's a slight life update for us. Nothing crazy, it was crazy, but nothing super bad. Just a little bit of a detour over the last couple of weeks. So, with that said. Welcome to the Unbroken Ground. If you are a first-time listener, thanks for being here. If you are curious about my wife's and my life journey and some of the things about her health, and there are some previous episodes, you can go back and listen to those first. But that's not going to be a major focus of this one. So if you don't, you're not missing out on too much. But thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Just posted that the podcast, which I do not really promote or try to get out there in any particular way. Experienced its 5,000th download, which is insane to me. I think I started this about 3 years ago. I had no plan to really promote, didn't know what would happen. Done. I've now recorded and posted almost 150 episodes. This is like 149. And so I'll get another badge when I get to 150. So here soon we'll have another badge to say that 5,000 downloads, 150 episodes, which is just pretty crazy. But it has been 3.5 years, and this year there's been more downloads than almost all of the other years combined. Definitely this is the largest year, and we're only in July. Oh, it is August. We're in August, so we're headed down the home stretch, but it's still going to be the best years for downloads. And so it's kind of a surreal experience, and so thank you guys for joining me in the journey. I'm glad that you are able to be a part of that. Thankful that you guys so do your part by just listening. And maybe sharing with friends. As always, you can find me on Facebook at Facebook / The Unbroken Ground, The Unbroken Ground at gmail.com, Instagram, The Unbroken Ground, all those fun places. So thank you guys, and we're going to jump on in. So one of the things that just at the top of the podcast, I'll just address because it's just a quick life update. But if you've followed along with the podcast, even Callie has come in and talked about in the past 3 years, which since I even made a joke tonight that I've been doing this podcast for about 3 years, and Callie has had a rough 3 years of physical health journey, and so I was like, maybe a podcast is a bad luck for you, but she has recovered and is still in remission from breast cancer, and she has had shoulder surgery, labrum repair in her hip, toe surgery. She had a calf surgery. She just recently, so all that has led, she's been having sciatica pain in her back and down her leg, and nothing has really helped with that. So she talked to the surgeon, and the surgeon was like, yeah, the only thing that will help is if we shave down your disc because it is pressing on your sciatica. So Monday, July 20th, which was 10 days ago. no, more than that. 14 days ago. Not 14. That's 15 days ago. That seems about right. But anyway, sorry. I took her to the hospital 6 a.m. She had the surgery. The surgery went great. But as she always does in recovery, they just couldn't get down the pain level to where they wanted it to. And so they were like, well, we're going to admit her. And we have done that before. When she had her labrum repaired, same thing kind of happened. They couldn't get the pain level under control. And so they even gave her like an epidural, and it still wasn't touching anything. And that just seems to be the life that Callie has. She just is not, her body doesn't respond to pain medications like other people. Her superpower is resistance to relieving pain. That's probably not a great superpower to have, but that's what she has. And so they were like, well, we don't want to send her home because if she's in this pain, you're just going to end up in the ER later, and we don't want to do that. And so they're like, we're going to admit her. So that was at 12 o'clock on a Monday, July 20th. And 9 hours later, 9.5 hours later, she was in a room. So for 9 hours, she laid in bed in recovery. And that's just the way it is. She wasn't it wasn't medically necessary that she get checked into a bed. So she's pretty low priority, and they were discharging somebody else. And so you just, that's the realities of being at the hospital. And so 9:30 she gets checked in. Like I said, we've done this before. So I went home, came home, slept, came out the next day, and she had been using a walker to walk around, but then her blood pressure was dropping, so they couldn't do that, and they started giving her like some pretty heavy narcotics, which kind of knocked her out and kept her from being able to really move around. And so they were even trying to get us moving in the direction of doing like skilled nursing, like checking her into like a nursing home and for rehab. And it's not really what she needed, but because of the way the medication was interacting, all that kind of stuff, that's where they were thinking that it was going to have to go. And so long story short, she was in the hospital from Monday till Sunday. And then so Monday the 27th, she came home. And Sunday the 26th, she came home. Monday the 27th, she was at home. She's been home for a week and has done much better and is getting stronger every day. And so we praise God for that. But that is one of the reasons that I have been pretty much a ghost in all things social media, and one of the reasons I haven't done anything with podcasting or anything like that, among other things. But yeah, so that is life update. And it actually helps to focus in on a topic that I'm wrestling through. So I'm just going to say at the very beginning of this that I don't have all the answers figured out. I have a lot of questions that I'm still asking myself. And so please don't take this as a fully fleshed out systematic approach to what I'm going to talk about. I am, and sometimes I just think through these things as I talk, and it helps to, talk and get them out of my brain and into the world so I can think through them. And so I think that the question that I have, or the thing that I want to really examine for me, is my connection, my ties with the idea that there's utility in suffering. I think that it's easier. So I think just as a baseline to be able to establish, I think that we look for utility in suffering, which basically what I mean by that is that we look for a meaning for why we suffer, and so that suffering has a purpose, because if it has a purpose, then the pain that we experience, then we can redeem it. We can say like, oh yeah, I had to suffer, but it was for this. And that is true in a lot of like short term ways and physical ways. Like, you lift weights in it and you drive yourself and there's pain that's like, you're pushing yourself, your lungs feel like they're going to be, there's that, and that suffering is temporary. And that the gain is that you get better, stronger physically. And so I think a lot of these, we often want to connect that same type of idea that, with suffering that we have, there's a spiritual component that is like, suffering is, and I would say I wouldn't go so far as to say that there isn't a utility to suffering. I do think that Jesus himself says that we're going to suffer, and I do want to like really just grab and hold on to this moment here to be like, I am so blessed. My wife is so blessed. We've gone through a difficult thing, and there's suffering in that. And I'm not saying like complaining of like, wow, like we've suffered enough. I'm not even trying to say that, but so I want to be clear in saying like, I'm like, I should never suffer, and people I love should never suffer. And if you follow Jesus, well, you should expect that you shouldn't suffer, because I think Jesus very clearly tells his followers in the Gospels, he says, you will suffer in this world. And I think that we have we've tried to paint a broad brush that all suffering has meaning. All suffering has utility. Like, well, I'm suffering this, so maybe God's going to teach me something this, or he's going to use this thing later. And sometimes he does, and sometimes we do learn things from that. But I think there's also another side to this that I'm going to explore, that I think is not as neatly wrapped up in a bow. And that is just suffering that has no utility. Now, if you listen to my podcast enough, you probably, if you are staunchly in the boat that God is, his sovereignty means that everything is only happens because God wants it to happen. So that is like this very hard set of, and I'm not trying to paint it in this way, but just there are those that, like, especially if you are more conservative and Calvinistic, and you're like, God is sovereign, so everything happens for a reason. Everything happens because ultimately because God is in control. Because if God is all powerful, and he and nothing can stop him, then everything I think it comes down to, as you start to basically parse that out, you get down to the foundation of things, is that like God either causes suffering, he allows it to happen, and I think that is somewhat a hard thing to deal with, unless there is also then connected with that suffering some kind of utility. Like, what's the purpose? There's a reason for this. There's a purpose behind this, and it's going to be redeemed because it's going to have this great purpose to it. And so I'm not necessarily that going to try to just jump away from that, or try to steer another direction, but I am going to at least jump into the theological deep end on this idea that in order for there has to be, so this is the thing that theologians have argued about for literally thousands of years, at least since the Reformation, maybe before that. But do humans have any actual free will? Do we have And I'm just going to tell you, for me and my theological understanding, humans have to have some measure of free will, um, because how can you hold if we don't have free will, um, and we sin, but it's not free. It's just our nature. Like, we can't avoid it. Or even like, if you're gonna lean heavily into the sovereignty, like everything happens just because God like wrote the whole story, and that's how it was supposed to happen, and nothing could change that. Like, then where's, and this is where, like, I'll tell you that I think where arguments go, but it's just like, where's the justice in the fact that you couldn't avoid the sin that you did because you have no free will? You were going to do that. Like, it was preordained, meaning that God, you could not have done anything other. And in that case, that sin that you do. And so, but if you can't avoid that, like if there's absolutely no, because your will on some molecular level or some cosmic level is being controlled by this deity that won't let you do anything but then how is it you're like, where's the justice in that? Because you didn't have a choice. Somebody, if we had if you had like a government official that held a gun to your head and said, look, you either steal this food or I shoot you, and then you steal the food and then they arrest you for stealing the food, like that is not even there you have a choice, right? You could die. But if you don't, like that doesn't meet a human sense of justice. Now there'll be some arguments that'll say like, well, God supersedes and is far above our levels of justice and understanding. And I'm not saying there's not some validity to that. That God is bigger and better and more huge than we are. I'm not trying to dissuade from that fact, but what I do think where I find myself landing, is somewhere is this, that in order for us to be able to truly choose the greatest good, in order for a human to truly choose the greatest good, he also has to have the ability to choose the worst. Because if at any point there is if there's some kind of force or a block from you being able to make that choice, then it's not genuine and it's not real, and so it's not even you making the greatest choice. So I would surmise, again, this is not a fully fleshed out thing, so please don't build your theology on what I'm saying, but just think about these things. I want you to think about how this fits into, like, as you read the Bible and your worldview, and like it's okay to ask questions, and it's okay to not know and be able to say, hey, what if it's like this? I'm telling myself that as I tell you guys as I talk about this, but I just derailed my thoughts, but so if you're going to create a world where there are going to be independent beings that are making independent choices, so that they can have the greatest capacity for good, that also means you have to have the greatest capacity for evil. Like, you can't, because basically, if you somehow cut off one, then again, it's not a very genuine, you aren't able to have the greatest capacity for good. You can't have, it's kind of like the argument of why God doesn't just physically live among us, because he wants us to have faith. And you can't have faith and have a physical representation of God just there, clear as day, being like, I'm God, this is who I am, look at me, you can see me, here are the watch the things that I do. Like, there's no faith there. You just get rid of faith, which is interesting, because that is kind of the description of what, and this is because we're way off topic, but it's kind of the description of what heaven is. Like, you're no longer living on faith. You're really living in the very presence of the physical Jesus and some kind of manifestation of God. Not the point. But if you're going to create a world then where beings have freedom of choice, which I think, like, again, if you have a very set view of sovereignty, you're not going to like that, because you're like, well, God is just sovereign. If any kind of choice that we have is illusory, it's an illusion, it's not real. I would then say that like it's a dangerous territory, because what do you do with all the evil in the world? Like, if humans don't have real choice, when they commit evil, they can't fully be blamed, because they couldn't choose not to do that. Like, if somebody is able to manipulate you at your molecular level to do things, and you don't have a choice, like that, that feels very unjust and unrighteous to punish somebody for making those choices, when you're like, oh, and I'm going to make you make those choices. And again, there are plenty of arguments that would say, well, yeah, well, you can't even really understand. We don't even understand why humans choose and do the things that they do now. Totally agree. Like, we don't understand fully why we make the choices, how our brains work, how our bodies work. Yes, I agree. But it doesn't change the fact that if you don't have actual freedom to choose, then then there has to be multiple outcomes that can happen. Then you get into, in my opinion, again, some difficulties with, like, justice and holding people accountable for things that they did. If they truly could choose, then yes, it makes sense that you could say, hey, you had every resource at your availability to do something different, which is kind of the discussion. Like, if you go back to Adam and Eve and you go to Cain and Abel, right? Like Cain is so angry because of his rejection. He's been rejected by God, and he's been rejected because, his offering wasn't accepted in the same way. And so his solution, rather than dealing with whatever shortcomings, whatever issues he has with God, was like, I'm just going to kill my brother. And God's like, hey, anger is knocking at your door. Like, you need to resist that. And so there's at least an idea built into Genesis that Cain had a choice. He didn't have to kill Abel. God didn't just set that in motion to say, yeah, sorry, Cain, you're gonna kill your brother. You're gonna be angry about this thing. Like that is not how the story reads. And so it pushes back against this ultimate sovereignty that where, like, every little thing, like, God makes and is in control of every little thing that happens. And that can be hard, because I think it actually is an easier place to just accept that whatever comes. Whatever happens, because God is in control. And so if God wants something to do something, he's going to do that. But even still, like, God is constantly inviting people into his plans and the things that he does. God is constantly asking people to be a part of what he's doing, and he's constantly disappointed with the Jews, the Israelites, when they don't join into the plans he's asking them to do. And so, like, it's hard to reconcile the idea that if he's asking, hey, I want you to come, be part of this kingdom building thing that I'm talking about, and I'm giving you all these laws, and then you guys turn away from me, and he becomes disappointed in that. If they never had a chance of not turning away, because God's like, well, I'm going to make you turn away because I'm sovereign, so you're going to do that. It's because I'm making a point, right? Then it becomes kind of to me, in my feeble brain, it becomes kind of a mockery of, like, the real struggle of, like, whether or not you're going to choose to live a life that's honoring and holy and pleasing to God, or choose one of rebellion that goes against what God wants, and if there's even really that choice, and because here I'll give it to some Calvinists who, in the early days of our country, there was even like Calvinists who were like, you can't even know if you're saved, right? Because God's the only one who determines that. So you can't even know, which is it's a tough place to be, like. So I don't want to be there. And so if you're going to create this world where there is a free being who can make choices, and you also have this idea that then you're going to have a world that is no longer perfect because sin has been introduced to it, and the world itself is going to have some of those very consequences built into its nature, and so in the Garden of Eden you have this idea that there was this harmony, that humans and the world and the animals, they were all living in this harmony. There was no strife, there was no conflict, and then when sin enters in and they get kicked out of the garden, like even the world itself turns against the humans, and the inhabitants, and so there's this animosity, and so there is this part of life that is chaotic, the unpredictable. Is it going to rain? Are we going to have enough water to keep the crops going? Like those type of things, and there's viruses, there's sickness. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we were reminded of. I mean, I know we were when COVID hit. Like, America is such a place where like we have the control. We can stop all disease and we can fix all the problems, and then something like COVID happens, and it's like we don't know like how to deal with this, and what we're doing is not working, and just how little control we really have. And it doesn't matter how rich you are or how much money you have. The virus didn't care if you believed in God, whether you believed in God or didn't believe in God, didn't believe if you went to church. It didn't care. And it was almost random in the way that some people who were totally healthy would get the virus and they would be killed by it. And then others who just kind of, it was like a light flu. And there was nothing you could do to change that. And so I think about, I think about the idea that there is some suffering that simply has no utility. I think that if you read Job, I mean, and I did a podcast kind of a couple months ago. I don't know. I did one. Go find it. I don't even remember which one it is, but I did one on Job and just talked about the idea that God never actually the idea is the wisdom pointed around like why people experience bad things. Like you deserve. Like there's this kind of this idea like, well, you're a sinner, so you deserve some bad things to happen to you. So you're just getting what you deserve. Like you're like the fallenness of the world is just it's part of, you're part of that whole system of like what's happening with the world, and so you deserve some bad things to happen to you because because you're in your humanness and your fallenness and your sin nature. Like there's actually a reckoning, almost a natural reckoning that you deserve those things. Like, I mean, that is the question the disciples ask, right? When Jesus is there's this blind guy, and they're like, who sinned, him or his parents? because the only way they could make sense of a world where somebody could be born blind, and in that time, because he was born blind, he couldn't work. And he just had to beg. Like, they were just like, well, obviously God is punishing somebody. So and what a crazy, like, I mean, we don't talk about this. I don't talk about this a lot, but maybe some people, but what a crazy question. Like, this guy is born blind, and so they're like, whose sin is he paying the price for? Whose sin? And the other crazy part of that story in the Gospels is that Jesus doesn't. He's like, you guys don't even understand what's going on here. He's like, it's not important who the sin, but it's gonna be for the glory of God. And then he grants him sight, and it's like, yeah, miracle, awesome, right? But like, he lived in darkness and suffering and poverty for up until that point that he met Jesus. And like what was the, like, you're like, oh, well, he got healed by Jesus. You're like, yeah, that's pretty cool. But what is could you even attach a redeeming value to that suffering, the utility of that? And even the disciples trying to make sense of that, of trying to be like, who was it that sinned? Like, obviously this is the suffering in the natural world. They were like, it's got to be obviously tied to something in the spiritual world, and so it must be a sin that his parents did. And we still have that sometimes today, where people are like, "Yo, you're sick. Well, it's probably because you've been sinning." And Job just kind of really just blows that out of the water, of like, because the friends are like, Job, dude, just admit what you've done, because God wouldn't do this to a righteous person. And like, we know, like, because we're the readers of Job, that we know the prologue. Like, we know that the reason the things are happening to Job is not because Job sinned, not because Job was unrighteous, not because there were any unconfessed or any sins in Job's life. It was a testing of Job, because he was righteous. He was suffering. He suffered those things because he was so righteous. And so I think one of the most famous Bible verses in John is John, I think it's 8:35. Forgive me if I butchered that, but it's Jesus wept. And the story is, as it goes, is that Jesus purposely delays going to see Lazarus. And so as he does, as because of that delay, Lazarus dies. And Mary comes out. Jesus is approaching the town, and Mary comes out and is weeping and crying, and Jesus sees her, and he weeps. And again, sorry, this is not a fully fleshed out theological. This is something you guys should all join in and believe this from this moment forward. But I'm starting to wonder and ask the question if, like, the reason that Jesus weeps is because of the senselessness of the suffering that Mary and Martha are going through because Lazarus is dead. Because Mary's like, Jesus, if you'd been here, you could have healed him. He's your friend. He's like a brother. If you had been here, he wouldn't have died. Is basically what she says. I mean, it's word for word what she says to him, and he weeps. And if you're John is very much into like the idea, like he paints a picture of Jesus who knows, and so you get the sense that Jesus even in this moment, as Mary is weeping and pointing out the obvious, like, Jesus, if you had just been here, he wouldn't be dead. That he knows what's going to happen. He knows he's going to resurrect Lazarus. He knows he's going to bring him back from the dead. And yet he still weeps. So I begin to wonder why. And I think right now where I land, I think he weeps for some of the senselessness of suffering, the tragedy of suffering. Like, because humanity is going to choose to walk a path that is going to lead them and lead the world into suffering, with wars and with disease and with hatred and with greed and with tribalism and racism and like all the things that break and destroy community and relationships and families, and the uncontrollable lust and greed for resources and all of those things, the senselessness of all that, the suffering that brings. I think God and Jesus and John are basically wanting to point out or just show that there is a, like, God understands, but there is a lack of utility here. The suffering that Mary and Martha go through because Lazarus is dead, like, it's not like it's not a lesson. It's not a, like, yes, like they believe, like even Mary says, I believe, yes, they're in the resurrection. I know that they'll be, but like, I mean, there are lessons to be learned, but like it's such, I think it points to the human reality that sometimes we suffer. Sometimes things don't make sense, and there's just no utility to it. And I think that part of trying to answer the problem of evil, is what theodicy does, and one of my favorite classes to talk about and try to think through, is that there are some acts and some examples of evil that were just, like, it seems almost sacrilegious to try to find redemption through them, trying to find redeeming things through them, like the Holocaust, like, it's just evil, and it's suffering, and just the insane, unaccounted for, even unknown amount that people had to suffer in that situation, and then the war itself, and then death, and I mean, like, trying to then come through and be like, no, there's redemption, there's redeeming qualities about this. It's a monumental task to try to explain if God is good and he has power to stop anything or to create anything on the earth and bring that about. Why would something that evil and that insane happen? I get it. It's hard to fit that into the system where God's is sovereign and the best of all possible worlds is happening because he is in control of it, and yet of all the things that could have happened that he could have directed, we ended up with something like the Holocaust. it's hard to reconcile that. And that's why I lean more towards the idea that we live in a world where God allows the greatest evil, because without allowing the greatest evil, which comes with freedom of choice, there's no way to have the greatest good, which is to choose to love God and live in such a way that is honoring to God and devoted to God. You can't have one without the other. You know the idea that darkness is actually the absence of light, right? Like you can't, if you can't have absence of good, then good, then what you basically have is that the least good things then look evil. And again, you don't have a free and active being then to be able to choose whether they want to do good or not. And so so you have to deal with that. And I have to deal with that. And I think one of the things that just is so hard, because again, and I said this at the top, and I'll say it again, like I'm so blessed. Like I could go on. Maybe I should. Like maybe I'll do a podcast where I just name all the blessings that God just poured out on us and myself and Callie in the last 3 years, even through all the suffering and all the things, like just the ways that he's been good to us, and the things that we've seen and the things that we know. But like 9 hours, Callie was in recovery, just in pain, just with nothing, and no medication could pull that away. And I just had a moment of, and those who have seen a loved one suffer, or maybe even lost a loved one, Callie's still with us, not saying that, but like have seen them suffer and the pain, and there's just nothing you can do for them. And you say prayers, God, because God, you could take this pain away. You could fix this right now. You've done it for people in the past, for other people. I know you can do this. I believe you can do this. And yet hour after hour ticks by, and there's no relief. And then I didn't even get into the whole why she stayed in the hospital for 7 days. It wasn't because the surgery was fine, so it wasn't a problem with the surgery. It was the recovery and the pain management and the way that they tried to do that, and the fact that she just was never going to be at the level of pain control they wanted to be at. But just at any point, God could have healed her body. We could have gone home. He could have done that. Yet I believe he has the power to do that. And then you start asking like questions of like, well, do I not have enough faith? Do I not say the right prayers? Have I go back to the disciples and the blind man, like is this like my sin coming to roast, right? Like I've been forgiven, but the consequences are still there. And so because I'm sin, that I'm not like, then God's not going to heal, someone I love. And then like you get, beyond all that, you get into like where Paul, the dude that God spoke to and put scales on his eyes and then had those fall away. Paul in Philippians is like, for 2 Corinthians First Corinthians, sorry, my brain scattered a little bit on that one, where Paul says, I have a thorn in the flesh, and I prayed 3 times. And God said, I'm not gonna take it away. So if Paul can't pray away, if you want to know who, you want someone who has faith, who has prayed such big prayers and seen people healed, and that's Paul. And yet there's something in God's like, nope, my strength is made perfect in your weakness. And so you have to throw that into it of yeah, God can heal, but he, for his reasons, may choose not to. And in the midst of someone suffering, that's a pretty heavy realization. My love and belief in God is not based on whether or not he heals the people I love, answers those type of prayers for me. And maybe that's part of the point. A lot of times God does those miracles for those people who need that little extra push so that they can believe. But then it becomes a battle of the heart to try to redeem and find the utility of suffering. Because I need it to be meaningful. We need it to be meaningful. It needs to mean something. It can't just be senseless. Because there's not much worse for us to try to fit into our worlds than experiencing something that's got no redemption to it, that's got no utility to it. And there may be things there were even when Callie was under heavy sedation and some drugs and stuff like that, she was still making conversation with our nurses and trying to ask and just trying to get to know people and just kind of see their heart and be and she even invited one of the PT therapists, who she was not a big fan of, I will say, for most of the time that she was getting therapy from her. She invited her to come to church, and there are those moments, but it just becomes hard to see. It becomes hard to grab onto the kingdom things, when it also means that you suffer or your loved ones suffer, and there's nothing you can do. And I think that's kind of why Jesus wept too. He loved Mary and Martha. He loved Lazarus. He loved his followers. He loved people, but he knew that they were going to suffer, and there was nothing that he could do. In fact, he may have even been looking forward to the fact that losing Lazarus was hard. But he was approaching the end of his ministry and his life, and he knew that those who loved him the dearest, they would suffer. They would watch him suffer on tortured on a cross and die, and how heart-wrenching that would be for his friends and his followers. And so Jesus wept, I think, because he was thinking on those things. And I think the natural human response is to weep, to just allow that I think that wave of grief just to wash over, to pour out. To try to make sense of it all with our humanness, our minds, our hearts, just trying to wrap it around that. So, what does all this rambling even mean? Where are we headed? I think for me it's just I'm just maybe too dense to remember the things I need to remember. So God just kind of has to bring the things back to me. But there's a famous psalm, you guys probably know it by heart, Psalm 23. And I've talked about this a lot, but I think it just comes back again and again and again because the truth is that I don't want to go through suffering. Like I want a charmed life. I want a life that's easy and I don't have to see people suffer, and I don't have to make hard decisions, and I don't have to have fear and like wonder if somebody's ever gonna, feel back, be able to regain and be back to the person they were before, and I don't I don't want to sign up for that. No one does. But Psalm 23, the famous one, often read at funerals. But I go back to the way that it's written. And the version that I remember it and have it in my brain from, it says that even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, it doesn't say I might walk through there. It doesn't say if that circumstance were to happen. It doesn't say in case I do. I think it very much recognizes that even walking with God, we're going to experience that we're all going to experience some very difficult, dark, hard times. Even though we walk through the very shadow of the valley of the shadow of death, even when we go through it, whatever that it might be, whatever that suffering might be, whatever that circumstance, that fear, that thing, whatever it might be, even though we walk through it, it is God who walks beside us. It is thy rod, thy staff that comfort me. And I think the question is it enough? And before you run to the, of course it is. How dare you? You can get there. I don't care. God and I have our own discussions, and I think the Psalms show that God's not afraid of some raised fist, as long as you come back to a place where you have a bowed knee and head at the end of the discussions and tirades. But is it enough to know that you will suffer? But if you cling to Jesus and cling to God, you won't suffer alone. Is it enough that Jesus wept when in the face of, I think, senseless suffering that had no utility? And I think that's the struggle. That's the thing you got to wrestle with. Yeah, the answer is yes. Like, it is enough. But what does that mean for you? What does that mean for how you approach God? I talked, I think, a couple of weeks ago about Jacob and how he wrestled with God, and he, from that moment on, though he became Israel, and some of the things that meant, he walked with a limp from that day on because he wrestled with God. He wasn't the same, and he physically, like, the pain, like, something about that, like changed him from the inside out, and he had a limp. It was you could see it. It was markedly different. And I wonder, in today's theological culture, where we want to uphold that God is good and loving and kind, and He is with us in that suffering. We have to hold that, but we also have to hold the other part of that, where God looks at Paul, and Paul says, God, I am going about doing your work. I'm like, if you have seen what I've done, if you've known the things I've suffered, God, if you could take this thorn from my flesh, whatever it might have been. And God was like, no, my grace is enough. My strength is made perfect in your weakness. And like, how do you hold that into your own lives and your own hearts? How do you fold that into your walk with God to say, God, I don't want to go through suffering. None of us do. But help me to see the ways that you're changing and growing me. Help me to see when sometimes suffering doesn't have an immediate redemption of a point or utility. It just is part of what living is as a human on this fallen world, where people can choose and people don't get it right most of the time. I think that I believe we have a choice. We can allow our suffering to drive us away, to curse God, which is what the friends were telling, Job's wife says to him, why don't you just curse God and die? And instead, Job was like, no, I'm going to cling to what I know about who God is. He never gets his answer, but he does find his place, which is to say, I don't know anything. God knows all those things. And but it doesn't make it easy. And it does make it feel like a bit of a dark night of the soul. To watch someone suffer, to live with a suffering thing, to sometimes maybe I'm just too sensitive, but I have friends, a friend who lost his wife to cancer, that he's trying to figure out how to do grief and how to do family and how to, young, like 40 and younger, like how do you even reconcile that? How do you even get through that? And then my good friends that mean so much to me and meant so much to my theological journey, who have just suffered so much for so many years and still are suffering. And they're so lovely. They're like, oh, we know God's gonna use this so we can minister to somebody else. And he's like, how do you hold on to that? Because I just want to yell and scream and be like, it's not fair, it's not right. Like when is enough? And then as I said earlier, like, but then you turn a little bit and look at the way you go, like, look how blessed, look at the blessings you have. And then it's like, yeah, but the blessings don't necessarily offset the suffering. Like, I'm not even trying to say that it does, but I think you have to deal with what that means. How do you approach God, even in the midst of your suffering? Even when the answer is, I'm not going to remove that suffering, I'm not going to remove that thorn, it's something that you're going to walk through. What do you do? I don't have any of the answers, unfortunately, for you. If you were hoping that I'd get to the end of this and be like, let me give you the 3 points that will help you walk past this, I don't have that. What I have is that I know that you've got to come back to me. For me, this is what I would say. I come back to the fact that I know that I love God and that he loves me. I'm known by God and he knows me. And the sufferings of this world, and this is not to minimize them, because I don't think that is the point. Like, I don't think like we're just like, well, these sufferings are, but the sufferings of this world don't compare to the glories of knowing God and knowing Jesus and walking for him and living for him. That doesn't mean that they're easy to go through and that we're like, yeah, bring them on. I want more sufferings. It just means that perspective and building up that heart that says, I'm going to accept the good and the bad that this life brings. And through all of it, may I be strong enough to proclaim the goodness and the glory of God. For he alone is worthy. He alone walks with me, even if I walk through the shadow of the valley of death. And so I may not love or want or like some of the things that happen in life, but I still have an opportunity to proclaim the goodness of God and his kingdom. And so that's my prayer, is that I would do that well. Through the good, the bad, and the ugly. Through the hurt, through the pain, through the suffering, through the good times, the joys, the triumphs, so that his name would be praised. I hope that you find some place to rest in that as well. I hope that brings you comfort, or it challenges you, or maybe you want to reach out and just ask more questions. But that's the goal this week, is to, no matter the suffering, no matter the pain, no matter the what's going on, is that we would find ways to proclaim the goodness of God and his love and his steadfastness and his commitment to us, and that we would proclaim that with everything that we have to all the people around us, because he is good. No matter the circumstances, he is good. And however the world works, whether it's sovereignty or some combination of sovereignty and free will or whatever, it doesn't change who God is and what Jesus has done for us. So may you be blessed this week. May you find those places to find praise, even in the midst of difficult times, even in the midst of sufferings. Thank you guys for tuning in. Sorry for the long-winded journey of as I dig through what I think, and what I'm dealing with, and I hope that you find some hope and peace in there as well. Be blessed, and